Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the season 2 premiere of My Adventures with Superman. It was a double episode premiere, and the first episode was called More Things in Heaven and Earth, which of course is a Shakespearean reference. As the episode starts, Clark has a weird dream in which Jor-El tells him that there is another like him. Lois wakes up at her desk from what seemed like a little catnap and heads to a meeting that she's late for. Apparently, it's Valentine's Day, and Clark's planned for his day with Lois, including a poem that he wrote, which apparently starts with the phrase, "Can you read my mind?" which is, of course, a callback to the original Superman film from 1978. Strikes everyone at the planet as a bit lame. Jimmy, Clark, and Lois visit a friend of hers at Star Labs, chasing a scoop on a meteorite that's apparently newsworthy. While there, Jimmy briefly talks with an apparently brilliant yet disgruntled spaceship designer that the lab won't hire. It turns out that the meteorite isn't a meteorite, but a Kryptonian ship, so Jimmy, Clark, and Lois visit Antarctica in search of it, after it apparently disappeared from all Earth's space-observing apparatus after entering the atmosphere. While there, Clark gets separated from Lois and Jimmy and is confronted by a hologram of his father, while Jimmy and Lois stumble into what is apparently the ship, in which they're confronted by Kryptonian security bots when Jimmy accidentally activates them. Clark talks with the Jor-El hologram and gets a history lesson on Krypton and details of his having been sent to Earth, apparently, as well as of Kara Zor-El's existence. Jor-El also tells him that the ship that attacked Earth last season was a ghost ship on autopilot and that there aren't any more Kryptonians to do any invading. Apparently, Sam Lane is Amanda Waller's prisoner, back at Task Force X headquarters, while Amanda scouts about the Kryptonian ship, trying to get information on the Kryptonians. Of course, she brought some of her goons with her, and soon enough, they're menacing Lois and Jimmy, causing Superman to have to fight them. This, of course, is complicated by the presence of kryptonite on the ship, which Waller has now learned of the existence of. Superman does get some help, though, from the Jor-El hologram, which neutralizes the kryptonite pretty much, before apparently relocating the entire ship and kicking out Waller and her goons. In fact, what he does transforms the ship into the Fortress of Solitude before the Jor-El hologram is destroyed by what I guess was left of the kryptonite after telling Clark that he has to find the Kryptonian comms beacon that was sent to Earth 22 years ago if he's going to find Kara, who is out there somewhere in her ship, the communications equipment on which has gone dead. Before the episode ends, Lois asks Superman to help her rescue her dad, which he says he will do, and we see what seems like at least one other Kryptonian who's out there and who is seemingly not a good guy. And that's where the episode ended. So I like this episode, but for me, it could have been a little grander as a season premiere. It was a little lackluster on the season premiere scale, but we did get some interesting teases. We got, Supergirl, which is great. I can't wait for that. We got the tease of that other sort of Kryptonian at the end. At least I think they're Kryptonian. We got to see the Fortress of Solitude, which is great. The biggest thing that came from this episode was the whole switcheroo about the Kryptonians. Apparently, there are no more Kryptonians, just as was true in the original comic. And this whole thing about the Kryptonians invading Earth is not actually ever going to happen. And it's not the threat that it was made out to be in season 1. And Jor-El is not some crazy megalomaniacal jerkface. He was just misunderstood by Clark. And now that's all straightened out, and that's fine because it makes things a lot more like how we expect a Superman show to be, where the Kryptonians are the good guys, or at least not the frickin' bad guys, not an invading, conquering force, which I really hated last season. I hated the idea of that. And, we got some cool moments again with Clark and Lois, who, are now well on their way to being a really cool couple. And we got that cool moment related to Valentine's Day where Clark says, "Can you read my mind?" as the beginning of a poem, which of course is a reference, as I said, to the original Superman film. And the scene in it where Lois is flying with Superman for the first time and sort of monologuing in her head about the experience.
Can you read my mind? Do you know what it is that you do to me? I don't know who you are. Just a friend from another star. Here I am, like a kid out of school, holding hands with a god. I'm a fool. So you look at me, quivering, like a little girl, shivering. You can see right through me.
Part of those cool moments with them was right at the end when she asks him to help her rescue her dad, and they're up in the sky, like, with nothing around them but clouds and the moon and the stars and stuff. It was really cool. And that's pretty much all there is to say about episode one. Like I said, it was a little lackluster. It could have been, I think, a little more significant as a season premiere. They did add a second episode to give the season premiere a little bit more heft, but I think the very first episode still could have been a little, beefier. But let's talk about the second episode. The second episode was called Adventures with My Girlfriend, which is funny. And as it starts, Amanda Waller wakes up and voices a self-affirmation mantra to herself before heading to work, where she brings coffee to her prisoner, Sam Lane, before interrogating him. Clark tries to tell Lois something, perhaps about Kara, when a boy approaches them and asks them to get Superman to help him find his dad, who disappeared from his job at Stryker's Island, which Clark and Lois think might have to do with Task Force X. Of course, that being the Suicide Squad. Superman takes Lois to Stryker's Island to investigate the disappearance of the kid's dad, and they find it empty before finding an elevator shaft behind a false wall. They descend to a lower level and unexpectedly find the comms beacon that Jor-El told Clark about before approaching Sam Lane in his cell. Jimmy, meanwhile, struggles to motivate his team of interns in the new Daily Planet department that he now runs. Mr. Lane is less than pleased that Lois involved herself in his situation because it put her in danger, and he doesn't like that she's associating with the Kryptonian, the alien. For her part, Lois doesn't like the idea of trying to find Kara because she sees her as a threat to Earth. While she's discussing all of this with Superman, her dad takes off and confronts Waller, who sicks her goons on him, prompting Superman to have to step in. And while they're escaping the goons, they find themselves in a detention area where they find the little boy's father, who tells them about how Amanda Waller is running experiments on people that they've been kidnapping, much to Superman, Lois, and Mr. Lane's horror. Superman frees all of the captured people, but is then confronted by one of Waller's goons. During the fight with said goon, Superman is able to locate and activate the communications beacon that his father had told him about. When Lois, Sam, and the freed prisoners run into a dead end at the edge of this facility where it meets the harbor there, they're confronted by Waller, who is out of her mind and says that she's willing to do anything to protect Earth from whoever might threaten it, even if that means harming or even killing a few civilians, once again, to everyone's horror, including Mr. Lane. But Superman shows up to push back her troops, and Jimmy shows up with a boat to get everyone off the island. Realizing that he has to lay low, Mr. Lane agrees to room with Clark and Jimmy at Lois's suggestion. Before the episode ends, and after saving her from one of her goons who had turned on her, the spaceship designer from last episode introduces himself to Waller, and it turns out that he is Lex Luthor. And that's where the episode ended. So, once again, I thought this was an okay episode. We see Clark finally get a chance to tell Lois about Kara, and we get her reaction, which is, that she's scared because she doesn't know what Jor-El told Clark. He does try to tell her that, but things keep happening. He doesn't get to explain fully. We also see that Waller is completely out of her mind. It's driven home in this episode that she's just a bad guy. I mean, there's just it's not like she's in a gray area. She's just a full-on sociopath at this point, it seems to me. And that differentiates her from someone like General Lane, who you thought in season one might have been just as bad as her, but obviously he's not, because he realizes in this episode that she's cuckoo. And so that sets him apart from her, which is good, because again, he's Lois's dad and you don't want him to be a bad guy. I think he's going to still be like a thorn in Lois and Clark's side because he thinks that Clark is a lame ass, because he doesn't know that Clark is Superman. He also doesn't like Superman. So I don't know that that would help necessarily if he knew, but at least he wouldn't think Clark was a lame ass, who leaves Lois in harm's way and stuff. In this episode, Superman learns that he can't see through lead, although he doesn't know that it's lead. He just knows that there's a wall he can't see through. So that shows us, just like last season, that he's not fully into his powers yet. And I think that's kind of cool. You get to see baby Superman, And of course, at the end, we see the reveal that the very smart scientist from the previous episode, who's pissed off that Star Labs didn't hire him, is Lex Luthor. And we know that Lex is now going to be part of season 2, but he's going to be working with Waller. So that's going to be a little intense, I think. So we'll have to see how all of that plays out as the season moves forward. But that's really it. There's not too much more to say. Decent episodes, and season 2 is off and running. So I'm going to get out of here for now. We'll be back to do a breakdown and review of the next episode once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.